you guess who's our guest tonight? Get an A on a test tonight. You can say you're the best tonight if you've guessed who. Here's the top of a photograph. Here's a peek at the lower half. Now a shot that'll make you laugh. Have you guessed who? Who's gonna share the times that were bad? Times when they blew it. Who's gonna share the struggle they had and how they got through it? We'll go after the facts tonight. Guess who's under the axe tonight? Just sit back and relax and see if you've guessed right. Have you guessed who's our guest tonight?
Good evening. I'm Agatha Richards.
And I'm Ed Rambeau.
And welcome to Guest 2.
The show that from week to week we'll be bringing you guest celebrities.
And each week at the beginning of the show, we'll give you clues and see if you've guessed who. You know, Ed, I'm really excited about tonight's show.
I know you are, but relax, Agatha, because this guy was in a maximum security prison.
Ah, but not for the obvious reasons.
He's an ace pitcher for an all-star softball team.
And I'll tell you, he can make a pitch to me anytime he wants.
Wait a minute now. This guy's been in company with Jimmy Hoffa, Fidel Castro, Malcolm X,
Robert Kennedy, Robert Moses, and even Cardinal Cushing. And if there's a disaster in town, he'll be the first person to let you know about it. So we better make this a good show or it'll be all over town, Ed.
So stay tuned, because right after this commercial,
we'll introduce you to a personality and a face that you see every night.
Welcome back. The music you hear in the background introduces our guest, Monday through Friday on Channel 2, 6 o'clock.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jim Johnson.
Agatha, Ed, how are you?
Fine.
Nice to see you.
Fine.
Good to be here.
Have you had fun this morning sitting here? We've been doing a
I have.
caricature.
Yes, I
working
have.
on
A lot. Because it reminded me of my earlier days in television, when television was brand new. And kind of what you're doing is sort of brand new. You know, you're ad hocing, you're doing your own sets, a lot of your own lighting. And,
Yes.
and sort of figuring out things as you go, the way we used to. And it was we had a lot of laughs in those days. A lot of mistakes, but those were laughs.
You need
And
something
now
to laugh
everything's
about.
so structured and organized. You know?
And you only have to do your one little part.
Well, what I do now, what is done for me, I used to have to do by myself.
Yes.
You know, we have these huge staffs of people, and everything is kind of regimented and organized and slotted and categorized and cataloged, and as a result, it's very efficient. We accomplish an awful lot, and the error factor is very small, and of course, the margin for error is not very large. It's not allowed to be very large because the stakes are so high. And there's still a certain amount of fun to it, but there's a certain amount of just plain routine after a while.
What about you're a top anchorman and you're in front of the audience, the TV audience. Do you get to go out as much as you used to?
I go out quite a bit. I'm going out now at least twice a week again. For a while I wasn't. I was going overseas a lot. But I'm putting my hand back in again.
Do you prefer giving the news or getting the news, if you had your choice?
I like doing both. I like going out and covering. And I like writing my own stuff and then delivering it on air at the same time.
At the beginning of the show, we said you were in a maximum security prison.
Yes.
We better clear that up so the audience doesn't think they're watching the next con every night of the news.
Right.
Could you tell us about that?
I was working for WBZ at Westinghouse Station in Boston. And this was 1960, I think, 61. And we went down there to play a ball game. I'll give you a little history of it. And as we were going through these doors, it chilled me to the very marrow. It was a series of electronically operated doors. One door would open, rumble, boom, 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 and you'd walk into a little passageway. And before the door ahead of you would boom, 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 open up, the one behind you would go boom, 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 would close and would clang.
So you're locked right in
and
there.
then the other one would open. And there was a series of doors that were rumbling and clanging behind you. And I thought to myself, God, how awful it must be to walk in here and you know you're going to spend 20 years in here. And I knew I was going to play the ball game, going to walk out. But I could still kind of feel. And that led to an idea like, what would it be like to be locked up? And so we did a broadcast. There's 3 of us now again. These are still the early days of television where you could do these things. There's a cameraman named Bob Sirachi, who became later a cinematographer, works in Hollywood now. Magnificent photographer. And Teddy Kavanaugh, who worked for CBS for a while, was the producer, director, and I was the correspondent. There's 3 of us. It was all handheld camera, mostly available light. And I was arrested in a liquor store by the Boston police. I went through the
this
whole,
is all set up.
Yeah, but I went through every step of incarceration, from the time of arrest, the initial booking, where you're gradually stripped of your humanity and your identity, and you become a cipher, a number. Then I was taken to Walpole, which is a maximum Massachusetts correctional facility, the big house, and there, a few people knew that I was. Few of the cons knew that I was a correspondent, but most of the population, the prison population, did not
know this.
No.
How did it make you feel, knowing that a lot of them did know?
I was interested in their reactions, and I found it a little frightening.
I would too.
The warden, that was all the rage.
And just
but when I got there in the prison, here were blue dungarees and a blue work shirt with my number and my name stamped on the back. And I was forced to take a shower, and we filmed me taking a shower, you know, strip searched, body searched.
You mean they actually did it the way they do that?
I did every step of the way to show people what it's like to have your humanity stripped from you. And even though I was, in a sense, play acting, I mean, I was a correspondent going through it, and I knew I wasn't going to stay there forever.
The feeling was still there.
The feeling was still there. And some of the feeling, I thought, it was chilling. It was fine. I spent a week. And when they closed that cell door, again, like, what? I thought to myself, if this were real, I don't think I could take it. I mean, I don't really know whether I had to have the kind of mentality that would prevent my going insane or killing myself.
Do you think the criminals become more hardened because of that?
I suspect so.
Yeah.
I suspect so. Because prisons, I mean, I have always believed that this business they talk about rehabilitation is nonsense. There's no rehabilitating done in most prisons. It's punishment. People want their pound of flesh. Society wants its pound of flesh. And I think a lot of those people, unfortunately, I don't know whether it's genetic or it's societal, are beyond redemption in the sense of worldly redemption. I think they're beyond being corrected. Some of them like being in prison. It's the only home they've ever had. But for me, it was a chilling experience. But it made for a very, very good special report, I'll tell you that.
I bet it did. You said it was a chilling experience. What, of all the jobs that you've done and places you've gone, what would you consider your most dangerous assignment? Because that wasn't probably your most dangerous.
Well, the 73 war in the Middle East, the Cambodian Khmer Rouge slaughter in '79, which was like the Asian Holocaust.
Were you on the front lines? Were you ever in danger of your own personal safety?
I was under fire a lot in Israel, and many times in Israel during its wars.
When you were young, you had you have a collection of war stories.
You like history? We heard your
yes, I was
history
in history. I tell you why. My father was a Maine taskmaster. And if I looked idle, there was always something he could figure out for me to do.
Scandinavian, right?
Right.
Yes.
But if I had my head in a book, I could avoid it, because I was learning, you see. And I was occupying myself constructively, you see.
Well, your parents were heavy into school.
Heavy. Oh, yeah. Well, an immigrant father in my neighborhood generally was, because he lived vicariously through his firstborn. Because my father's second-grade education, very intelligent man. He was a master mechanic. No, my father's dead. But so I started reading historical novels. I think a guy named Kenneth Roberts was one of them I read. The librarians allowed me to read in the adult scene. In those days, too, everything was categorized. Kids were kids. And you were at certain ages you were allowed to do certain things. And then, for example, I wore knickers until the 9th grade. And when you graduated from 9th grade, then you got long pants. There were traditions, tribal rituals you went through. But anyway, I was an excellent reader, and so the librarians gave me a special dispensation to allow me to read anywhere I wanted to in the library. So I got into historical novels, and as a result of that, I got into history. And from that came the idea of, then came the World War II was coming. The clouds were there in the late 30s, the Anschluss in Austria, Sudetenland, Czechoslovakia, and eventually World War II. And I was fascinated with these early radio reports that I would be hearing from Prague, Berlin, Warsaw, wherever, and they were hard to hear, hardly audible, crackly, full of static. But the idea of a man standing there in Prague describing the blue air raid lights were on, the city was dimmed, and...
Who was the great radio announcer that would do all of that?
Well, there were, in those days, there was Cecil Brown, H.V. Kaltenborn, William L. Shirer. Merle came a little bit later when he created really CBS News. But hearing that was exciting. It was a combination of it was history and new history. And I thought, gee, that would be a great way to make a living, because it was also a little bit glamorous. It was also a little glamorous, too. It was exciting.
Yes.
But it had a sense of drama to it. That's how it all started.
Yeah, all the old movies about that,
Do you still have those war stories, or that collection you had?
Yes, oh, sure.
Do you?
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah. In fact, during the war, before I went in the war myself, I collected the front pages of my hometown paper and made huge scrapbooks out of them. In fact, I've got about 20 scrapbooks of World War II that I put together when I'd be babysitting my sisters and my brother before I got called up myself. And they're quite a collection. I look at Life magazine, Time magazine, Chicago Herald and Examiner, all kinds of clippings, columns, pictures, maps.
Yeah.
I followed the war like I was some kind of field marshal. I don't know why.
That's great with the maps. Do you find now, when looking back, that I guess most people do that the old days quotes were more exciting than
I think
today?
you always think that way because you forget the pain.
You do, yeah.
You remember the laughs, you remember the excitement, and you forget the humdrum, you forget the routine. I think that's natural to say the good old days.
The good old days,
Yeah.
yes. Well,
You were into baseball, so right after this short commercial break, we'd like to talk a little bit about the difference in baseball and journalism and why you made the choice, because you were offered a contract when you
We'll talk,
said so.
yeah, sure.
We'll take a
also,
break.
I want to hear about the most chilling person you've ever met. I know you were talking about that earlier, and I would like to, we'll find that out when we come back.
You, Agatha.
Stay tuned.
Right, thank you. I like Hi, welcome back. Jim, we have a couple messages for you first before we get a
really?
comment from Andre.
Oh, yes, I was speaking to Kay Ballard, who's going to be doing one of our shows, and she said to say hello.
Thank you. Hello to
Right.
her.
She's a wonderful lady,
Yes.
and she said that you're a marvelous man, so
That's
she
very
said be
sweet of
sure
her.
and say hello.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we also would like, since we've been
Oh,
revealing...
let me tell him about Jack O'Brien first.
Oh, go ahead.
I've been dying to tell you this. I saw a show with Jack O'Brien, the columnist on, and he commented that you were the best anchorman in the business, and that also that you look like the star of a Western movie.
Well, I got to tell you something. The first thing he wrote about me when I came to town, this is in '64, which was in, I forget which paper now, it's defunct. He envisioned me sitting on a horse. That was the first thing he wrote about me when I came here. And I was incensed. Since then,
were?
of course, I've gotten to know Jack.
Oh, you've gotten used to it, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, he said I should be on a horse.
Well, if you wear Ralph Lauren clothing, because he's very...
Yes.
No, I don't wear Ralph Lauren.
Now everybody's going to wonder what kind of seat you've got behind your news thing.
This is probably the first time most people are seeing you from the waist down, because you're always behind
Oh, that's
the desk.
right,
Sorry.
yes.
Most
But
people
he
are
is-
shocked at my height.
He is a very, very tall man.
Yeah, big
Extremely
man.
tall. Andre has been doing your caricature over here.
Yes,
and
I knew
we'd like
that.
to-
I haven't seen the results, though.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we'll see it at the end of the show.
He always writes a little comment on the bottom. Andre, would
What
you
have
like
you
to
written?
read your comment?
But now be ready for this, Jim, because they're always good.
This isn't exactly my comment, but I often wonder what it would take to surprise Jim Jensen.
You know, I have been asking myself that for quite a while.
That's interesting. Even you've been asking that.
Because I say to myself, gee whiz, I don't think anything more can happen that's going to shock me. And yet, things still do shock me, but I can't tell you exactly what it would be. Something in news, I suppose, but nothing about human nature surprises me anymore. I mean, human nature is capable of anything. It doesn't surprise. I'm sometimes shocked and I'm dismayed and I'm disheartened, but I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. And that doesn't mean I'm cynical about it either, you know.
No. Not in the least.
No.
What did you write, Andre?
Says, did you ever get the feeling that you've seen all this stuff before?
That's good.
Yes. That's terrific. Yeah, that's right. Yes, I did. Yes, right. Deja vu. Yes.
Now, you made a comment earlier in the show, and about that you, a person who was the most chilling person you'd ever met.
Jimmy Hoffa.
Jimmy Hoffa. Why?
There's an aura about him, and
Power?
something in his eyes, or something that was not in his eyes.
Satanic?
That's interesting.
They were blue eyes, a very pale blue, kind of like the pale blue eyes that were described by Edgar Allan Poe in that Heartbeat story, the Telltale Heart. He's talking about his uncle, whom he had just killed, with his pale blue eyes. And Jimmy Hoffa had those kind of pale blue eyes that had absolutely no warmth, looked right through you. And he was a small man, so his figure was not imposing. Yet there was power, and there was ruthlessness.
Right.
And I saw some of the same characteristics in Robert Kennedy, as opposed to his brothers, the late John F. and Senator Ted, who were on the warm side. They were more outgoing, more full of Gemütlichkeit, hail fellows, well met. Bobby was brilliant, but also ruthless. But he was not criminally ruthless, whereas I got the feeling that Hoffa was criminally ruthless. I wouldn't want to be his enemy, that's
right,
for sure.
Yeah. They were both family men, weren't they?
Yeah.
Both of them very supposedly family.
Yeah, so I don't know what kind of a guy he was in person at home. Who knows? He might have been the most charming, warm, sweet little man in the world, but when I met him, he wasn't. That was probably his public persona.
Yeah.
But there was no warmth. It was chilly.
I felt...
Jim, I have a question about the news media, which I'd like your answer, because many people you hear, they talk about one aspect of it, is that they're so quick to jump on a story sometimes, and they never consider the long-range ramifications that could come from a story leaking or giving great importance, like the Tylenol incident. Because of it, many people feel that the subsequent similar incidents were perpetrated by the news media.
Well, I suppose some of that's true, and I don't think it can be avoided.
How can you?
But I'm sure it happened with newspapers. When they're just newspapers and not television. There's a certain amount of copycatism in everything that goes on.
But you feel it's important the news gets out.
You can't stop it. You can't censor it. You can't not report Tylenol deaths for fear that someone's going to do the same thing with Bayer.
Yeah.
You can't.
And what about the other issue that you hear people talk about is the elections, how you, almost at 12 noon, before the polls in California have opened, you're already telling who it is, who you think it is, and each network is kind of trying to jump the other to be first.
Well, it is a matter of thinking. We know these sample precincts that are scientifically drawn, when they are filled up, they within 1 or 2 percentage points. And if it's within 1 or 2 percentage points, we don't call it. We say it's too close to call. But when it's within those parameters, we'll call it. And that's the way it's, and it's never been wrong. Never been wrong.
But don't you think that by projecting the winner that early, that there may be
You mean it might keep people in California home?
Well, millions of people maybe haven't
Making
voted.
their mind for them.
And they'll say, well, what's the point if I go and vote? Because we know who the winner is. So if a million people are taking that attitude,
I think it's a good point, and I think it's been raised in Congress, and I do think there will be some legislation that will probably control some of that, so that we're going to have to keep our mouth shut until California polls are closed, for example. Make sure the election is over, coast to coast, before we come out with those numbers.
Well, we have another message.
I see some sense in that, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you. We have another message coming up. My cameraman's waving his hands at me. We'll be back in a moment.
Stay tuned, please. Welcome back. We've been sitting here chuckling with Jim Jensen because he's got something very funny to tell you. But first, we'd like to give you some clues about next week's guest.
Next week's Guess Who becomes Guess Who Done It, with the only living person who knows the real answer.
An intriguing true story involving one of Hollywood's well-known other women from the 1940s. A story of rape, and murder.
So tune in next week when our guest reveals a secret she's been harboring for over 50 years.
The true identity of her sister's rapist.
And his murderer.
Now, Jim?
Is that murderer dead?
We hope so. We asked her that. We were worried about that. Jim, we were laughing about something earlier. I had told you that one of the things that I'm very worried about sometimes is that if I haven't eaten, and I don't like to do it before a show, that my mic might pick up the gurgle and you'd hear this, you know, underneath. Do you ever worry about things like that on the show?
That one doesn't bother me.
I mean, on the news?
I've been concerned about hiccups. I've come close. I've come very close to a sneeze in mid-sentence. And have fiddled with one like sometimes a long story, and I can feel it right poised, right on the edge. Any second, it's just going to go kavoosh.
That's terrible.
That's never happened. I have burped on the air, like, good evening, you know, that's happened.
Yeah. Right. Have you said words wrong?
What's the worst,
What's
what's the worst thing you said on the air?
Yeah. What's the worst
thing?
The worst
thing? That was the most embarrassing to you that...
Well, I used to have trouble with the phrase, special message would come out, speckle massage. That was one. I learned how to
I had trouble with
pause
that, too.
special and message.
Yeah.
And for a long time, when I first came to New York, there was a guy who was a mayor of one city in Jersey, I think it was Newark, and he went to prison like most mayors of Jersey towns. That's a terrible thing to say, but there's been a lot of problems with politicians in New Jersey. Hugh Adonisio. I could not say that name to save my life. You practically throw me right out of the studio. And I've had bathroom problems.
Oh, that's cute. I would like
If you're on the air
that.
for 5-6 hours, you're going to have problems.
Jim, thanks very much for joining
You're
us. We had a
welcome.
great time. Will you come back again
Sure, I'd love to.
sometime?
I'd love to.
We never
'cause
got
there's
to your
so many-
baseball.
Right, there's so many
well.
things
We'll
we
have to
want
talk about that next time.
Would you like to see a picture? We'd
Yes,
like you to
I would.
sign it. Great.
I would.
Let me
Why
get
don't you
your
come over?
mic off here.
Thanks to you and our guest tonight, we can say we've been blessed tonight. We've had only the best tonight, our guest and you. Everyone wants to hit their mark, and though we may have a day that's dark, everyone's got a special spark that